On today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we are going to be talking about the Panthers surviving in their game against the Colorado Avalanche as they defeat them by final score of 5-4. Jacob Winans will be joining me on this edition of Winans Wednesday to discuss the ups and downs of this game. The Panthers going on an early lead, blowing it, but still finding a way to win. We'll be discussing this and more on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, January 11th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MonoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden. And if you want everything prospects related, make sure to listen to Locked On NHL Prospects with Heidi Halakash. So, Cats fans, there's two schools of thought when it comes to yesterday's game. Is that I feel bad for the people who didn't watch this game because they missed a wild one. But then there's a way of thinking about how this game went from a 3-0 lead, then being up 4-1, blowing a third period lead, and then it being tied 4-4 before the Florida Panthers won this one. So for the people who didn't happen to stay up for this one, you might have lucked out because of the years that this game might have taken out of your life too. So there's two ways of thinking about this, because it was just you think at points in this one where the game is possibly in the bag, especially early on. Of course, Paul Maurice spoke about in the middle of the game in an interview with Emily Kaplan about being nervous about this kind of lead when he was interviewed. And man, regardless of all that, the Panthers find a way to win. And this will be a perfect time to bring in my guest on the show. It's a Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, which means it is a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. Jacob, I usually ask, how are you feeling? But I want to ask this in a different way tonight. How's your heart rate?
Honestly, that third period, I probably should have had a cardiologist on speed dial. I mean, there's not really a whole lot you can say about to really put it into words what kind of roller coaster we were on in that third period. We can dive into some of the details about it, like issues with sitting back and not pressing anymore when they have leads, going over 10 minutes without a shot on goal to start the third period, giving up 3 goals before getting their first shot in the third. Obviously alarming trends. You don't want to see that. But at the same time, I'm more than happy with the fact that they put up 5 on the defending champions on the road at Mile High. That is not an easy venue to do that. I was pleased with the goaltending for most of the game, aside from a 5-minute stretch where it kind of imploded. Most of the game, I was pleased with the goaltending. Special teams had their best performance of the season, arguably. Great special teams tonight. And then, this game really had everything. It was almost like three different hockey games rolled into one. It had a little bit of everything. It had dominant Panthers, it had dominant Avalanche, it had fights and scraps, and it had really everything you look for in a hockey game. It's exciting. It's a ESPN Plus game, so there's probably a large hockey audience that got to watch it, and it was an exciting game. But at the end of the day, that was 2 points the Panthers desperately needed, and they got it. It was not pretty. It was extremely ugly. You don't want to see them winning games that way, but we will take 2 points any way that we have to take 2 points. So I'm more than happy with that win. And honestly, if they have to play like that, I'm happy that they're doing it in a late night West Coast game, because I had no chance to fall asleep watching that game. Absolutely not.
No way that I was neither. And for those wondering, right now I'm looking at my clock on my laptop. It is 1:16 a.m. Eastern Standard Time as we are starting to record this edition of the show. And just the different types of goals and the different stretches of dominance for the Panthers, off to a little bit of a slow start. The Panthers, I believe it was like 2.5 minutes to like 50 seconds that the Colorado Avalanche had more offensive zone time than the Panthers. Only had one shot on goal through the first 7 minutes. And Paul Maurice spoke about what was the key to those three goals that the Panthers scored was that penalty kill for the Panthers. And the person that was involved the most on that first penalty kill was Mark Stahl, closing in on the gaps, closing on the shooting lanes. And he even got on the offensive end as well on some rushes. Didn't get a point, didn't score, but even then he was getting in on that. I don't know how much I want to see that out of Mark Stahl as well, but the key for the Panthers was Paul Maurice spoke about it, was that penalty kill. And then of course I discussed this on yesterday's show about the line changes that happened for the Panthers. And of course, look what happens. You're getting dominated in the first 7 minutes of the game, and then you try a little bit of chip and chase for Anton Lundell, and then he gets it to Sasha Barkov, maybe a little bit out of position by Devon Toews on that, and then Barkov goes backhand on Alexander Georgiev. And one of the unsung heroes in this game as well, Sam Bennett, who's in trade rumors right now for the Panthers, him and Sam Reinhart. A big block that and deflection that he had in the Panther zone starts a rush between Carter Verhaeghe and Brandon Montour, and Brandon Montour goes bar down as well. And then of course the power play, you spoke about it really at the beginning, 2 for 2 on the night, including a Sam to Sam play where Reinhart retrieves the puck right behind the net. Georgiev before that goes behind his net to try to get it in the trapezoid, and then maybe has a little bit of a hard time getting back in his net, and then Reinhart to Bennett gets that one through. And really that it started with that penalty kill for the Panthers.
Yeah, the penalty kill really. I feel like everyone was kind of nervous watching that penalty kill, because Colorado's a team that has really struggled on the power play of late, but that's a team that also has a ton of firepower, and I'm sure they saw a Panthers penalty kill out there that has been weak lately, and they probably looked at this game as a really good opportunity to get their power play going, and the Panthers just didn't allow it. It seemed to turn the momentum of the game, and then the first goal, like you said, it's a great individual effort from Lundell to get that to chase his own puck, go 1-on-2 to get it back and get it to Sasha Barkov. That kind of thing is contagious. A penalty kill like that is huge for the team. Then a fantastic individual effort where you got a guy giving 110% to get his teammate a goal and get on the board. That kind of stuff is contagious, and the rest of the team wants to follow that. The Panthers' goals tonight were really scored. Almost every single one of them, if not all of them, were, except maybe the Brandon Montour one, where they were all right in front of the net. They were all effort goals, all hustle goals. It was all instances where the Panthers just seemed to want it more than the Avalanche, and that's just what the rest of this season is going to have to be. It's gonna take a lot of individual efforts, and it's going to take it from everybody. And beyond just the offense, I saw tons of timely shot blocks tonight. I saw great sticks and great positioning at times. Aside from a couple of really bad mental breakdowns that really let Colorado back into the game in that third period, I really can't question the effort too much tonight. It really did seem like guys they weren't getting scored on tonight by sleepwalking and not caring. It was a couple of breakdowns mentally, but it was not for lack of effort. The effort was there 100% tonight, and there's not really much argument to be had for that. Sam Bennett was fantastic, and effort is never in question when you're talking about Sam Bennett. Um, Matthew Tkchauk was fantastic. I'm sure you're going to bring up this stat later on, Matthew Tkachuk and his average distance of his goal scored, but not to lean too much into it. It's just the Panthers' goals tonight were all dirty area goals, and even the Montour one comes off of an effort play from Sam Bennett. So it's about effort, and then you have to win those 50-50 battles, especially in front of the opposing net. If you want to, like Tom McLean said in our chat today, he said it's like robbing a bank. That's where the money is. You get to the blue paint. That's where the goals are, and that's what the Panthers did tonight. And they're going to have to make a habit of that, because that's if they want offense and they're not going to get it from pure transition and rush chances like last season, then you got to adapt and getting the greasy ones in front of the net. That's what we saw tonight, and I think we need to see more of it.
Yeah, and the fact that they did it in different ways, like we mentioned, chip and chase on transition via a block and being right there, but it also came with a lot of missed opportunities as well for the Colorado Avalanche, shooting themselves in the foot. As far as their power play, they're very pass happy as well, and the Florida Panthers really benefited off that. There is, even on one of their penalty kills, the Panthers were pinned a little bit to their right, a little too much, where Mikko Rantanen was right in front of Sergei Bobrovsky and just flat out missed. There was another one where Gerard couldn't get a shot off right as well, where Bobrovsky was right on his stomach as well, and just couldn't lift it enough to get it on the goal. And listen, you take a couple of you see those, and you count your lucky stars sometimes when it comes to that. So we're gonna continue that conversation. We're also gonna discuss more about Matthew Tkachuk and just what a treat he's been. Continuing the praises of Matthew Tkachuk, as just he gets 2 goals on the night for the Panthers. But first, we're gonna tell you all about Bet Online. And betonline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, news, stats, and analysis. Get all the latest odds and trends for every professional amateur league out there, from pro football, college bowl season, to basketball and hockey. We've got it all at BetOnline. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today, use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. Back on this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. It is a Wednesday edition of the show with Jacob Winans here on this Winans Wednesday. And, you know, the Panthers go up 3-0. The Cogliano goal, which Cale Makar looked like he was ready for the referees to blow their whistle after Matthew. It looked like he cross-checked Matthew Tkachuk, but even during that time, I was saying this game is nowhere near over for the Panthers, and still the Panthers came out firing in that second period really early on. It kind of felt like the Dallas game, but for like a 180 for the Panthers really in the first 15 to 20 minutes, because they were the ones that didn't have as many shots as the Colorado Avalanche, but the pucks were going into the net for the Panthers. But let's just talk about Matthew Tkachuk, who scored the last 2 goals of the game. But let's start with the first one. Right place, right time. Brandon Montour scored. Of course, he scored the second goal of the game, but also gets the secondary assist on the fourth one, where he just skates easily around the perimeter, Barkov tries to get it on the net. Sometimes that what we've yelled at even on Twitter and even on this podcast in the past is just trying to get the puck into the net, and then it all of a sudden bounces right into Matthew Tkachuk's lap, and right place, right time, gets it in for 4-1. And just as the second period is winding down, Panthers were absolutely dominant in that period. That was their best period. It wasn't a 60-minute performance, but that second period was really kind of where they buckled down, uh, forced the Colorado Avalanche outside, trapped them in the neutral zone, didn't give them much offensive zone time as well. But even though they blew that lead, it felt like that the second period at times, when looking back at it, that was kind of like the period where you saw like the Panthers. That was the period that they won the game, in my opinion.
I agree. That was probably one of their best periods of the season, if not their best. As far as effort and just doing the right things. It didn't necessarily translate to a bunch of goals or anything. The goals really came in the first period, but they just played that period the right way, and they were rewarded for it at the end with the Matthew Tkachuk goal. But they really, that was the epitome of what Panthers hockey has looked like over the last couple of seasons. Just overwhelming pressure. I want to say they outshot Colorado 17-4 or something like that in the second
Mhm.
period. It was a pretty wide gap, and it was really just off of rolling the lines, pretty even ice time, rolling the four lines, everyone doing the same thing, hard forecheck, possession in the O zone. Uh, what really set the tone with that period was how they came out to start it. The first shift of that period was almost a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes almost of zone time, just pinning the Avalanche top line and top D pair in their own zone. And I think I want to say it ended with a Sam Bennett chance on goal, but I'd have to go back and watch that shift. It was a dominant shift. The Panthers were able to roll two lines in one shift in that O zone, without the puck ever leaving the zone. They had two whole line changes. So um, you come out and start a period that way, it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the period. I thought they had a great second. The wheels came off a little bit in the third period, but that second period, that's if you're the coaching staff, if you're a player on the team, that's the period you want to go back and look at as this is what we need to be doing. This is going to win us hockey games. And Matthew Tkachuk, I mean, we're running out of things to say about the guy. I don't know where the Panthers would be this season if not for Matthew Tkachuk, but it would very likely be at the bottom of the league if not for Matthew Tkachuk this year. He's been absolutely dominant, and he's not afraid of any aspect of the game. He'll camp out right in front of the net, take pucks off the body, and whack them into the net. He'll throw a hit. He'll block a shot. It doesn't matter. He's a guy who's out there to win games, and he's going to do whatever necessary to win. Tonight was another great example of that. And honestly, I'll say this: if the Panthers were a little bit higher in the standings and had a little bit better to show for his efforts, I really feel like he's right there in the Hart Trophy conversation this year. He's been that good.
Mhm. Yeah, of course, record has a lot to do with how you're viewed as well. I mean, Connor McDavid right now is leading by a lot, and the Edmonton Oilers are fighting for their playoff lives as well as at this point in time. But the ESPN broadcast brought up the stat of Matthew Tkachuk, 8.1 feet per goal scored. We knew he was a net front presence. That was something that we talked about all summer. But seeing that stat, and listen, that's combined with him having the most passes from the trapezoid as well on freezing defenses. The goaltender's like hugging his post, and of course when with the mask and how hard it is to see peripherally as well. With all of that as well, it just makes it so intimidating on goaltenders as well. And the fact that and this is what I like about whenever the Panthers are on ESPN broadcast, they bring up stats that sometimes we don't always see on the Bally Sports because it's so Panthers centric when these guys look at just throughout the league and see, and we really get a taste of really how Matthew Tkachuk really is compared to the rest of the league.
Yeah, I agree. I honestly had no idea that he led the NHL in shortest average distance for his goals. That's a pretty impressive stat. It's not something that a lot of people really care about on a surface level, where they go looking for, oh, who leads the league in shortest distance. That's not something people are looking up or really caring about, but it really speaks to the type of game he plays. The Panthers have lacked a net front presence for years now. We had it a little bit with Hornquist, but as he's aged, that's kind of tapered off. But Matthew Tkachuk is absolutely elite in that aspect of the game. With honestly, there's not really anyone that you could argue is better at it than Matthew Tkachuk right now in the NHL. And then his creativity behind the net with those passes, it's created chances for Barkov, it's created chances for Sam Reinhart. He's working with every line he's on, produces. So he's maybe not the prettiest skater, not the fastest guy, but he really knows his role, and he plays it better than anyone else in the league is capable of playing it. The Panthers are benefiting from it. I was super impressed with his game tonight. I think it's the average distance stat is really key to me, because that the Panthers are really trying to move away from just being a rush team, and Matthew Tkachuk is really leading that charge. I think that's something that they need to continue to hone in on. I think that's something that bodes well for his entire tenure as a Panther, because the thing is, that's not something that really goes away. Scoring from that close in front of the net, that's something that you can always do. It's not something that goes away. It's about positioning. It's not like he's relying on his speed necessarily. He's not relying on ridiculously quick hands. He's just getting in the right spots, and he capitalizes when he does. And that's something that there's longevity to that. That's something that he's going to be good at for his entire time in a Panther uniform. So I think it's exciting. It's definitely a new and novel concept to Panther fans. We're not used to having a player who does that all the time. But I mean, just watch that. Just watch the game-winning goal, the fifth goal of the night. That was the most, for lack of a better term, he was just like, F it, I'm going for it. Turns to the net and just starts whacking at it, and takes a lucky bounce, goes in, wins the game. You need a little more of that. Just, it doesn't have to be pretty.
Mm-hmm. And just like LeBron said when the big three first signed in South Florida, not one, not two, not three, four hacks that he had right in front of the net at Georgiev. And hey, even though he wasn't the one who exactly touched the puck after, with Makar trying to scoop it out from the blue paint and then it bouncing off Evan Rodriguez's skate and into the net, that pressure that he put there just really affected the play. And of course, when you're taking that many hacks, it creates an opportunity for pucks to bounce a certain way that defenders are just roll their eyes or hit their stick on the ice once those goals do definitely go in. So it's just, we love it on our side. That's for sure. But this will be a good time to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to talk about the third period and how we had a little bit of a scare for this Panthers team, as scored a lot of goals, got off to multiple 3-goal leads, but the Avalanche did fight back to at least make it a game for this one. And we're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment here on this Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, where the Florida Panthers are coming off a 5-4 road victory over the Colorado Avalanche at Ball Arena. And Jacob, as great as we spoke about Matthew Tkachuk and those 2 goals, one of being the game winner, one of them which was on the power play. Did not mention that, but just the comfort level that the Panthers had in that third period, where it was 10-0 as far as shots on goal, and all 3 of the goals by the Colorado Avalanche were scored before the Panthers could even get their first one. And Mikko Rantanen leads Colorado in every statistical category, most statistical categories by a long shot. I know Nathan MacKinnon has missed a little bit of time this season, but just continuing to just carry this team, even though they've had a hard time scoring. But of course, uh, we have to consider the injuries that the Colorado Avalanche are going through. They're still without their captain, Gabe Landeskog, as well as one important piece. But Mikko Rantanen tries to wrap around, and then it bounces off Sergei Bobrovsky's skate. And I was thinking this in my head, but I wasn't saying this out loud, that Nathan MacKinnon only had 1 shot on goal in through the first 2 periods. And there was a game last season where the Florida Panthers didn't even allow Nathan MacKinnon to get 1 shot on goal. And that was like in game number 4 of the season. And 20 seconds later, the team that scored the line that scored the goal stayed on the ice. Rantanen gets a stretch pass over to Nathan MacKinnon, and Bob didn't face a lot of shots, was great in the ones he uh that he faced, but man, that one by Nathan MacKinnon, that one was just kind of a backbreaker for the Panthers, and all just 20 seconds apart for that one. And then all in the middle of that as well, the Panthers and the Avalanche go on a 4-on-4 where JT Compher and Brandon Montour go to the box for unsportsmanlike conduct, a neutral zone turnover, which Arturi Lankinen scores off a rebound, but though Palmareese challenged it to be successful, for an offside. But then Comfort retrieves the puck just 6 minutes later after all that, and ties the game, goes barred down shortly after all that. And you would think that the Panthers would have had a break after that challenge was called offside. But what were your thoughts? What were your thoughts on all that, with the 10-0 shot on goal advantage for the Avalanche, and just the adjustments or lack thereof between second and third period?
Yeah, so my thoughts, and this is kind of something I've been harping on ever since we lost to St. Louis at home when we had a 4-1 lead in the third period. My issue is with the lack of offensive presence in the third periods when they're winning games. You cannot, in today's NHL, you cannot sit back and not bother playing offense anymore when you have a lead. It doesn't matter if it's a 1-goal lead or a 4-goal lead or a 3-goal lead. It does not matter. You have to continue playing your game until the net is empty for the other team, and then you can sit back and wait for a puck to come your way and chip it down the ice and aim for the empty net. Until they pull their goalie, you have to play your same style of game that has you in the lead. And the Panthers have time and time again done the same thing, where they sit back, they intercept pucks, chip it down the ice, and they try to do that for a whole period and maintain their lead, and it just doesn't work. Especially against a team like this, the Avalanche are such a high octane, fast team. You just can't do it. And I think the Panthers showed a real lack of composure on 2 separate occasions in this period. After the first goal of the third period, the Mikko Rantanen wraparound, that is a really tough break. I feel for Aaron Ekblad because he played that perfectly. He had Rantanen wrapped up, took him down to the ice cleanly. He played that perfectly defensively. And the puck just takes a really awful bounce off of Bobrovsky and goes in the net. Sometimes that happens. You get a tough break, you give up a tough goal that you probably didn't deserve to have scored against you. You have to move on, and the Panthers just did not move on. They weren't ready when the face off at the very next face off. They weren't ready when Nathan McKinnon comes in the zone. It was a sneaky little drop pass at the blue line. Bobrovsky lets in a absurdly soft goal, which made no sense given the way he had been playing up to that point. They have to show a little bit more composure after catching a tough break. The Rantanen goal's a tough break. They played it well. It happens to go in off of a fluky bounce, and then they just collapse for 20 seconds, and Nathan McKinnon scores again. I think they also showed a real lack of composure after the goal was waved off. They caught a break, but they still looked shell shocked until the game tying goal that actually counted went in. When you catch a break, you have to turn the momentum quickly, because just because that goal didn't count, that Avalanche bench is still feeling it and like, hey, we got this goal. Let's go get it for real now, because we were offside by an inch, but we're playing really well. Let's go get it again. And the crowd at that point, they feel like they got screwed, even though it's obviously offsides. The crowd feels like they got screwed over because, of course, it's a home crowd. They want their goals to count. So the crowd's behind them. You have to have a shift to take that momentum away. The Panthers didn't do it. It ends up tied. I think those two moments, they showed a real lack of composure, and then there's a lot to be desired with the coaching here, because you cannot continue to do the same thing when you have leads. It has not worked. It's still not working. The Panthers are lucky to get this win, and it's still not working. The third period strategy is still broken. You can't just come out and dump pucks down the ice and hope that the other team gives up, because they're going to keep bringing offense. I think I saw a stat on ESPN today, talking about comeback wins in the NHL. This year's NHL is on pace to have the most comeback wins as a whole in the history of the sport. So if everybody's capable of making comeback wins, you can't be the team that sits back and just tries to dump pucks and kill the clock, because you're not going to be able to do it. And it really bit the Panthers today. And luckily for Matthew Tkchauk, and a really dumb penalty. I want to say it was Rantanen who hit Cousins in the head. Really stupid penalty. Panthers are able to escape with 2 points, but I mean, going forward, it's something that has to get cleaned up, because it could kill the season if they can't hold on to leads. I mean, this is a team that hasn't shown the ability to come from behind. So when you have leads, you have to hold them. And that the dump and sit back strategy, it's just not sustainable. It's really not.
Yeah, and it's been a rarity this season when the Panthers have had big leads. And of course, you mentioned the St. Louis game, up 4-1 in the third period as well, before blowing that one as well. And for this one, thankfully this time around they got 2 points. And even if they went into overtime and won, it's not a 4-point swing, because of course being a Western Conference team as well. So 2 points is 2 points, no matter how you get it. But there's still cause for concern for this one. We spoke about, even pre-recording, how with Buffalo losing in regulation to the Seattle Kraken at home, that the Panthers are creeping up a little bit in the wild card standings, and how if the Panthers didn't get behind the 8 ball early, that even if you lose on Thursday against the Vegas Golden Knights, you still see this as a successful road trip, it being 500. But now it makes Thursday's game even more of a sense of urgency, that you have to try to go into Vegas and T-Mobile Arena to try to get the 6 out of 8, something, a benchmark that I personally set even before this road trip even started for the Panthers. So it's a good win for the Panthers. Detroit won tonight. Pittsburgh won tonight after being down 3-0. But you know what? You took care of business. It wasn't easy for this team, but you found a way to get the 2 points, and now everything is right in front of you. And I didn't even get to mention that Spencer Knight is now placed on injured reserve. And Alex Lyon was called up, so we were expecting Sergei Bobrovsky to be between the pipes on Thursday night against the Vegas Golden Knights. So it's there's still alarms. Don't get me wrong. There are still alarms for this team, and when it comes to the stretches that they play. But I'm happy about the 2 points.
I agree. Right now, you take 2 points any way you can get it. It's good that it didn't go to overtime because anything can happen in OT. But 2 points is 2 points, especially against a Western Conference team. You don't really worry about anything else except getting 2 points to add to your bank. Now against the Eastern Conference opponents or division opponents, you got to lock these games down in regulation, and you can't give the other team a chance to even drag it to overtime because that's a point you can't let them have. But for tonight, I'm happy with the 2 points. I'm happy they got it done in regulation. And I think this game also gave the Panthers a lot of quality film, a lot of examples of what they are capable of doing. You can take a lot of the positives from this game and try to build on those, and the negatives are the same negatives. We have to eliminate them, but there were a lot of positives, a lot of quality hockey that they can take from this game that to show themselves like, hey, this is what we're capable of. This is what we need to be doing consistently. They have the blueprint. It's right in front of them. They're capable. We're seeing it in stretches. This team is capable of playing with anybody and beating anybody. They're capable of doing it. They just have to find a way to put it together consistently. It's tempting right now. We're over halfway through the season. We're scoreboard watching and we're mapping out the path to the playoffs. We don't need to do that right now. Just win games. The teams ahead of the Panthers are gonna lose. There's gonna be losses. There's gonna be head-to-head matchups that you have to win. But right now, they just need to keep adding 2 points to their bank every time they go out onto the ice. Um, that game in Vegas, like you said, probably a must win. And not to look too far ahead, but if you can beat Vegas, you come back home, you play a not so great Vancouver team, you have a good chance to have your first 3 game win streak of the season. So let's we can. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but if we get that Vegas win, things could be looking a little better. So I'm happy with 2 points. You beat the defending champs in their building. That's 2 points you'll take any day of the week.
Mhm. Yeah, and Panthers are starting to get some wins together. They're starting to climb a little bit up the standings despite not having the games in hand, like the teams above them. So they're they're doing somewhat their part, even though they've been up and down since the Panthers have returned to play. But the good thing is that they're healthy for the most part coming into this, so it gives you a little confidence that hopefully maybe that they could put some things together,
and
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 maybe we'll.
you got to be thinking Duclair has to be coming soon, right? I mean, we're right around that window. You can add him to the mix. I think we could really use that scoring punch, and now a little bit of a power play boost. I think things could be looking positive if we can continue this trend. So
Mhm. Absolutely, and I think that's a great way to end it. But uh, Jacob, I want to say thank you once again for joining me on this Winans Wednesday edition of the Florida Panthers Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, celebrating a 5-4 victory over the Colorado Avalanche. Thank you once again for staying up with me, as now we see 1:48 a.m. On East Coast time. Tell everybody where they can follow you online.
definitely, you can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Winans 8. I'm usually pretty active on there, and yeah, man, always a pleasure to talk Panthers hockey, especially after a win. Who needs sleep anyway?
Hey, absolutely. And this is our last late night Winans Wednesday of this season, at least, as uh the all the at least mountain time slash Pacific time games are out of the way after tonight. So thank you once again, my friend, and I'll see you next week.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL and Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure you listen to today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects. Locked On NHL Prospects will be covering all the up and coming prospects from junior hockey to college to overseas. You could catch Locked On NHL Prospects on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. So I'm Armando Velez. with Jacob Winans. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.